What is the best stock for beginners? I have my opinion that I'll share here. My name's Jeff Beers. This is the 40 Finance channel. Let's jump right in. My favorite stock pick for beginners is ticker symbol QQQ, Invesco Trust, which features the top 100 companies on the NASDAQ stock market exchange. And I say this pretty confidently, not only based on past performance, but I think looking ahead to where the world is going in general. I would not bat an eye if I met someone on the street who was like, hey, I don't have all the money in the world. I need one stock to invest in that's relatively stable but can produce massive gains. That's exactly what QQQ is for me. And the reason why is that most of the companies represented in this ETF are the leaders of the future. And they have the potential not only to grow on their own, but to partner and or buy out anything else that would come around in their competition wheelhouse. Of course, it has 100 holdings total, but those are weighted by market cap. So what we see here is the biggest holding is Microsoft at 10%, Apple almost 10%, Cisco and Adobe and Intel right around the 2 or 3% mark. Then you get into Broadcom, PayPal, Texas Instruments, NVIDIA, and Qualcomm. And if you go through the list of all 100, you're going to see a nice mix of technology-backed companies that are doing big business here in America. So while you're going to have some ebbs and flows, and when you talk about NVIDIA and Broadcom and those sort of cyclical stocks that go with the chip sector, then you're going to have companies like Apple and Microsoft that are very bullish on the consumer front and the sort of infrastructure front for most people's lives. You have some stability there. You also get into things like PayPal, which is obviously a payment processor. And there's retailers. There's just a whole list of companies that you would recognize and are doing very well to move the market. The other side of the coin with a top 100 index like this, that's market cap weighted, is as companies fall off, let's use an extreme case such as bankruptcy. When they fall out of the top 100 and they're having problems, they're out of your life, essentially. The ETF drops them. It's a gradual drop that happens slowly. And then they're buying companies that are growing fast. So a company that would go from, let's say, the top, let's say the 99th position, and over 3 or 4 years found itself in the top 10, these weights, these market cap weightings would increase with that company as it continues to grow. So not only do you get to participate in technology's biggest names and biggest movers, but without even trying, you drop the biggest losers for as ever long as you're in the fund. Guys, if you don't like reading stock news every day, if you don't like to look into quarterly reports and other indicators, this is a pretty hands-off approach to making a decent amount of return on your investment over the long term. And the best news is if you invest as a retail investor, aka through a stock brokerage or low fee brokerage, then you can control all this yourself. You're not giving it to your 401k. There's no additional fees that are going to come out of your earnings. And the bottom line, if something happens in your life that you need to access the money quickly, you can sell some of your shares and have cash back in your hands. I personally believe it's just a great balance of sensible investing that's still on the verge of growth, but not into a spot where risk gets too heavy. Now, if we look at performance over the past 5 years for the QQQ, this is exactly why I think it's the best stock for beginners right now. The most popular way to look at the market as a whole is through the S&P 500. Okay, so this graph has 3 lines. The dark shaded background of blue is our QQQ. It sort of has a lighter highlight line here. Obviously, it's performing the best of anyone on this chart. The red line is the NASDAQ composite, which is everything in the NASDAQ right now. And then the darker blue line is the S&P 500, okay? And it's the S&P 500 that is typically the benchmark of stock market performance for most people when they say, you know, the challenge of investing is, can I as an individual beat the S&P 500 every year? It sounds super simple, but it's not. And if you take a lot of risks in smaller stocks in an effort to beat the S&P 500, you have the potential to lose a lot of money over and over each year, because the S&P is just a general indicator of the economy at the end of the day, at least on the United States side. So what we have here with the QQQ over the past 5 years, and you can see how the growth has taken place over the recent boom in the stock market, but the QQQ has returned 119% over the past 5 years. Compare that to the NASDAQ composite at 96%. Okay, so that's a pretty big gain right off the bat. But if you take it back to the S&P 500 and compare against that one, that returned 55%. And remember, it doesn't take a huge position to realize these gains. If you're in a small retail brokerage, you can buy 1 share, you can buy 1,000 shares, whatever you can afford. If you would have put that money away in 2014 and your friend put the same amount in the S&P 500, you would have got 119% gains, and he or she would have got 56% gains. So now, there's one important caveat here, and that is past performance doesn't always indicate future success. However, my personal opinion, and when you look through the top 100, I see the companies in QQQ as the ones that are leading the future. I'm very passionate about that. I can take the bull case for each of the top 100 and compare it to the bull case to some of the traditional S&P 500 companies. And I think long term I would win time and time again. But everyone has a different opinion. Everyone has a different feel for which way the United States economy is going. So do your research. But anyone who walked up to me in the street and said, what is the best stock for beginners to invest in? I would point them at the QQQ every single time. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think your favorite stock is to recommend to beginners in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next video.